Hi, this is Tom from MVP Chess. Welcome back to my series on Bobby Fischer's seminal work, My 60 Memorable Games. In this video, we'll be analyzing game number 14 that Fischer played versus Keres in the Candidates Tournament 1959. We got another mental Sicilian Najdorf coming up that you're not going to want to miss. Before we jump in, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. You can subscribe to my channel by clicking the button in the right-hand corner of your screen. Thank you so much for your support. Let's jump right in. E4, C5, knight of 3, D6, D4, open Sicilian on the board, and of course, Fischer plays his beloved Najdorf variation. He was very loyal to this opening, played it almost exclusively. The downside of this, of course, is that it allows his opponent to prepare, do some home preparation, which Keres cooked up something with his team of Soviet GMs before this game, surely looking for revenge for the loss he suffered in Zurich in 1959 that we looked at earlier. Bishop G5, most testing variation. E6, F4, Bishop E7. Fischer, as I mentioned before, experimented with the poison pawn variation later in his career, but here we have Bishop E7, Queen F3, Queen C7, preventing the bishop from coming to C4. Castle's queenside, knight bd7. And bishop e2. We'll see. What's the point of this move, bishop e2? We'll find out in just a second. But this was kind of the opening novelty that Keres concocted. And he was probably waiting to spring it on Fischer, much like Frank Marshall waited to spring his opening invention, the Marshall attack in the Ruy Lopez against Jose Raul Capablanca. Although Marshall waited 10 years for his chance to play that opening, only to have the human chess machine, the world chess champion, simply refuted over the board. This game reminds me a lot of that story. B5, bishop takes f6, knight takes f6, all normal stuff here. And after e5, bishop b7. Okay, Keres unveils, I should say, his opening prep. He plays the speculative e takes f6. Okay, so Keres is willing to part with Her Majesty in exchange for the minor piece rook and pawn. So Fischer here, everything up until now has been forced. Fischer plays d5. Threatening to trap this bishop. Now, the simple castles is threatened. So, Keres plays the desperado. Bishop takes d5. And we have a series of exchanges here. Fischer needs to move the queen, so he brings it to the nice active square on c5 and king f8. So, let's stop here. Because after c3, defending the rook, maintaining the knight on c5, Keres most likely arrived at this position with his team of seconds in his preparation. Clearly a prepared line. But Fischer contends it was in this position that he failed to appreciate Black's best plan. So, let's take stock of this position. Fischer's got the queen, but material is even in that Keres has a rook, knight, and pawn for compensation. And this is a nice active knight on d5. The rooks are well coordinated. The extra pawn could prove useful one day, especially this 3-on-2 majority. So let's pause here, and I'm just going to ask a simple question. What is the problem with Fischer's position? And once you identify the problem, how do you solve it? This is undoubtedly the question that Fischer asked himself, figured out the solution, and then executed the next move. So, over to you. What should Black play here? Congratulations if you saw that the problem with black's position is this rook on h8 in the corner, okay? You get a gold coin if you even identified that that was the problem, okay? The fact that Fischer lost the right to castle isn't that big of a deal, okay? The king will find security on the king side, you know, after advancing one of these pawns and stepping up. The real problem is that it's difficult to get this rook into the game. So congratulations if you found the move. Pawn to h5. Great move. Great move by Fischer. Gold star if you found that one. Pawn to h5, gaining space on the queen side, okay, preventing g4. But most importantly, after f5, we see Fischer's idea, rook h6. He's able to play this rook lift and get the rook into the game along the 6th rank. And Fischer thinks that it was this idea that Keres probably missed in evaluating this position. Okay, he felt like black was going to have a really hard time coordinating his forces, in particular this rook, but Fischer found a really kind of simple solution to it that more or less refuted Keres's opening novelty. But of course, there's still a lot of game to be played, and Keres is by no means lost in this position. He just doesn't have the initiative that he thinks he does. But where he goes wrong, as we'll see, is that he plays as if he's better in this position, where really he should be in damage control mode now. And we see this by the next move, f6, okay? Giving up a pawn for activity, and now Fischer has a material advantage. Pawn to h4, rook d8. Okay, the king sits nicely on g7. Keres looks to activate the rooks and cause trouble on the 8th rank, but Fischer's got this covered. He has queen g1 check, and after queen f2, this forces the knight back to passivity on the e2 square. Okay, and after rook g6, Fischer's not concerned about a check at all. He can simply advance his king. There's no mating net or anything to be had here. g3, f5. Okay, now Fischer can look to activate and centralize the king via the h8, a1 diagonal. Keres gives a check and exchanges. So now Fischer is able to repair his broken pawn structure. So he stands a clean pawn up in this position with great dynamic attacking chances, thanks in no small part to this king who's just kind of floundering around in the center of the board. Okay, if white had a more secure position for the king, it would be a different story. But here, Fischer's able to really put his opponent on the back foot. G takes h4, queen takes h2, rook d4. Okay, Keres protects this important pawn on h4, and so far is holding the balance. But look at how Fischer is able to exploit the coordination of his minor pieces. Okay, and this is the power of the queen. She can just zoom all over the board, attacking weaknesses here, attacking weaknesses there, and really stretch the defenses of the opponent, really make their position become uncoordinated. So that's really his strategy in this ending. King c2, Keres looking for safe haven for the king. King e5, nice centralizing move by Fischer. Now Fischer has relatively a much more active king than white's. Pawn to a4, queen to f1. Okay, here we go. Just poking and making small threats to the minor pieces and really trying to disrupt the coordination, which forces the knight to c1. Queen g2, king b3. The king is forced to the side of the board, and now Fischer plays a nice move. Pawn takes a4. Okay. Keres really can't accept this pawn. Let's say, for argument's sake, there are a couple lines, but let's just look at the sample value variation. King takes a4 after queen takes b2. This is a really, really dangerous position for white. So that's why Keres plays king a3 in this position. But now the queen infiltrates queen c2. Again, hitting this knight. It's very difficult for white to sort out his coordination in this position. Specifically this knight, okay, which is just lacking an advanced outpost to really make much of a difference on the game or influence it in a meaningful way. Knight d3, king f6, the king simply steps back. Knight c5, queen c1, good move by Fischer, menacing a check on a1 and then picking up this important b2 pawn. So that's why Keres takes on a4, queen e3. Okay, here we go. Again, Fischer just putting the question to this knight. Where do you want this knight to go? Okay, just trying to disrupt his coordination. And this forces the knight to the center of the board. So material quality has been restored, but look at white's pieces. They've all been driven to the side of the board. Meanwhile, Fischer's king in a really nice active position on f6 with the queen perfectly centralized, looking in all directions, just ready to completely stretch the defenses for Keres. And Fischer just simply starts advancing his pawn. Okay, and this is his strategy coming to fruition. Okay, he's managed to, with the queen, with the more active, agile piece, just force his opponent's pieces into passivity, and now he can use and look to exploit this superior activity by just simply pushing this passed pawn. And white is not in a good position to deal with this. Rook d4, Keres tries to get back to mount a defense. King f5, knight b4, queen e7. Awesome move. Again, showing the awesome power of the queen. This temporary pin is basically decisive. Now, Fischer's going to pick up this pawn on h4 and have connected outside pass pawns to push. Sorry, after queen e7, king b3, queen takes h4. Okay. These pass pawns are on the board. Knight d3, g5, defending f4. c4, queen g3, again pinning the knight. It's just amazing in this game how badly Fischer's queen abused this knight. I mean, this knight just got kicked all around the board. White had to go through contortions to save the piece and to keep his position together. And this is really what ultimately lost Keres the game. So this was just really model play for how to handle a queen versus the pieces. You know, if you find yourself in this material imbalance, it can often be really difficult to play. But Fischer, as usual, shows us the way here. c5, f3, of course, Fischer advances. King c4, f2. Keres has no choice but to capture this pawn on f2. And now it's just a matter of technique. c6, queen takes b2. King c5, queen c3 check. Keres moves the king. And, of course, Fischer just plays pawn to g4. And in this position, I'll turn it over to you for the coup de grace. What did Fischer play in this position? Pause your videos. Okay, congratulations if you found the mate in one. Queen e5, checkmate. Keres king bites the dust, a mate in the middle of the board, and the game is over. You don't often see checkmate on the board in a high-level game like this, but I don't know if Keres didn't realize this was mate or just realized his opponent played a really good game, especially refuting his opening novelty, and just wanted him to be able to put the checkmate on the board. Either way, it was a great game. So As we'll see throughout the rest of the series, Fischer, and especially as he got stronger, Fischer's opponents really looked to target him and really looked to target his openings, okay, and try to concoct opening novelties. So this was another huge thing that Fischer had to contend with, okay? Not only the inequity in terms of the support he got, the seconds, for example, that Keres had from Russia versus basically having no help from the U.S., but also the fact that his opponents were able to prepare some really devious opening novelties. Eventually, fast forward to the World Championship in 1972, Fischer finally realized that he needed to start to deviate. So it was actually in that championship match with Spassky that Fischer played 1c4, played the Pierts, played Alekhine's defense, and some more offbeat openings to avoid Spassky, and in particular, his team of Russian seconds opening preparation. But it's interesting that already in 1959, we see these battle lines being drawn, and this is going to go on for the rest of the decade. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you ever find yourself up the queen, your opponent has a rook, a minor pieces, and pawn as compensation, this is a great game to study. Use the queen and her agility and her mobility to poke holes in your opponent's position, disrupt their coordination, and then look to exploit the weaknesses that those moves have left behind. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. You're not going to want to miss my next installment when I review game number 15. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye.